Sometimes, love doesn't arrive in a luxury car or a designer suit. Sometimes, it walks quietly through the service door, wearing a simple uniform, carrying stories that money can't buy. This is the story of how a millionaire met the woman who would change his heart forever. If you love stories that touch your soul, don't forget to subscribe to Black Inside USA, where every story reminds you, not all gold shines on the outside. In a world where stories speak louder than words, this is Black Inside USA. Real emotions, real people, real change. The city never truly slept. Even at midnight, the lights of Manhattan painted the sky with restless dreams. Inside a glass tower that touched the clouds, Alexander Holt, one of New York's youngest millionaires, stood in silence by his office window. To the world, he had everything: wealth, charm, and power. But deep inside, he carried a loneliness money couldn't fill. That night, he stayed late again. His penthouse was spotless, as always. Every corner gleamed, thanks to his new maid, Mara, who had joined just a month ago. She was quiet, respectful, and moved like the air, barely seen, always efficient. He never asked much about her, she never spoke unless necessary. But tonight, something unusual happened. His phone buzzed, a business call from Europe. Before he could answer, Mara, who was dusting near the bookshelf, picked up the other line by mistake. And then, she spoke. Imperfect, fluent Dutch. Alexander froze. The soft, musical rhythm of the language filled the room like a forgotten melody. Her tone was confident, elegant, completely different from the humble way she usually spoke English. He turned slowly. Mara, he said after a moment, you speak Dutch. She froze too. Her eyes widened for a split second, then she lowered her gaze. I'm sorry, sir, it was an instinct. The caller spoke Dutch, and I just replied. Alexander tilted his head, intrigued. You just replied, fluently. She didn't answer. Instead, she quietly placed the dusting cloth on the table and whispered, it won't happen again, sir. But he wasn't angry, he was fascinated. Wait, he said softly, where did you learn to speak like that? Her fingers tightened slightly around the cloth. It's a long story. And then she walked away. That night, Alexander couldn't sleep. The image of the quiet maid speaking like a diplomat haunted him. There was something about her, something she was hiding, and he wanted to know what it was. Over the next few days, Alexander found himself observing Mara more closely. She was careful with everything, from folding towels to arranging books in precise order. But what fascinated him most wasn't her efficiency, it was her eyes. There was wisdom there, the kind you didn't find in someone who just cleaned floors. One morning, as he left for a meeting, he saw her outside the building, standing near the service gate, talking softly on her phone. Her words were in Dutch again. He couldn't understand a word, but her tone was filled with emotion. When she noticed him, she immediately hung up, looking startled. Alexander smiled gently. You don't have to hide it, you know. Hide what? She asked softly. That you're not just a maid. Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You remind me of someone who's running from something, or someone. Mara looked away. Everyone's running from something, sir. And with that, she walked back into the building, leaving him with more questions than answers. A week later, Alexander hosted a private charity gala at his penthouse. Important guests, politicians, investors, the kind of night where every glass sparkled and every smile hid a deal. Mara worked quietly in the background, dressed in her uniform, unnoticed among the glitter. Until the moment that changed everything. A Dutch ambassador, tall, gray-haired, with a gentle accent, was among the guests. He was speaking with Alexander when his eyes suddenly locked onto Mara. He froze. Then, in disbelief, he whispered, Mara van Dijk. Every head turned. Alexander looked at him, then at her. You know her? The ambassador's eyes were filled with shock. Know her? She was one of our brightest translators at The Hague. Fluent in 6 languages, she disappeared 2 years ago after a tragedy. The room went silent. Mara's face went pale. She stepped back slowly, her voice trembling. Please, sir, not here. Alexander's heart pounded. He could see tears forming in her eyes, tears she tried to hide. She whispered, I'm sorry for the disturbance, and hurried out of the room. The ambassador sighed. She was a brilliant woman. Her husband died in an accident during a diplomatic trip. She vanished after that. I never thought I'd see her here. Alexander stood there, stunned, his world spinning with questions. Who was this woman he thought was just a maid? And why had she chosen this life of silence? Later that night, after the guests were gone, Alexander found her sitting alone in the staff lounge, her face buried in her hands. He stood quietly at the door before speaking. "Mara," he said softly. She didn't look up. "I'll pack my things, sir. I understand you don't want me here anymore." He walked closer. "Who said I don't want you here?" She slowly lifted her gaze. Her eyes were red, but her dignity was still intact. "I lied to everyone," she whispered. "I told your agency I had no experience because I wanted to disappear. I couldn't be the woman people pitied anymore. I just wanted to work quietly. Be invisible." Alexander's voice was gentle. "You were never invisible, Mara." For the first time, she smiled faintly, a sad, beautiful smile. "Then I didn't do my job well enough," she said softly. He sat down across from her. "You've been through something painful. I can see that, but running from who you are won't heal it." Her hands trembled slightly. "It's easier than remembering what I lost." Alexander hesitated, then said the words that would change everything. "Maybe you didn't lose everything," he said. "Maybe you just haven't met what comes next." Mara looked into his eyes, surprised, and for the first time, the distance between their worlds began to fade. For days, the penthouse felt quieter than ever. Mara moved like a ghost through the rooms, speaking only when necessary. Alexander noticed the small things, the way she paused by the window as rain traced silver lines down the glass, the way she seemed to listen to music no one else could hear. He wanted to talk to her again, but every time he tried, something stopped him. Maybe it was respect, maybe fear of breaking the fragile peace that still existed between them. One evening he returned early from a meeting. She was in the kitchen, rolling dough for bread. The radio played a soft jazz tune, her sleeves were folded neatly. Without looking up she said, "You shouldn't be in here, sir. You'll ruin your suit." He smiled faintly. "Then maybe I need a new one." That earned a quiet laugh, a sound so gentle he almost missed it. "Would you like some tea?" she asked. "Only if you have one with me," he said. She hesitated, then poured 2 cups. They sat at the small service table, steam rising between them. "I looked you up," he said finally. "I know you were one of the youngest interpreters at The Hague. You were admired." Her eyes clouded. "Admiration doesn't fill empty chairs, Mr. Holt." He nodded slowly. "I understand loss more than people think." "Do you?" she asked. "My parents died when I was 22. Plane crash. Same year my company started to grow. Everyone saw success. No one saw the grief behind it." She looked at him differently then, less like an employer, more like a man carrying his own shadows. "Maybe," she whispered. "We both learned how to hide behind work." The next weekend the building's maintenance system shut down for upgrades. Alexander told his staff to take 2 days off. Mara refused at first, but he insisted. "Go outside, Mara, see the city again, it's still beautiful." She almost said no. Then, quietly, she agreed. That Saturday afternoon, Alexander walked through Central Park to clear his mind, and there she was, sitting on a bench near the lake, feeding crumbs to pigeons. No uniform, just a simple blue dress and a scarf around her hair. He approached with a smile. "You didn't tell me you'd come here." She looked up, startled, then smiled shyly. "I didn't think you'd be walking alone. I wanted to see the world without a meeting attached to it," he said, sitting beside her. They talked for hours, about languages, travel, favorite books, childhood dreams. She told him about growing up in Rotterdam, the smell of the sea, her mother's tulip garden. He told her about late nights coding in a dorm room, believing someday he'd build something that mattered. The afternoon sun began to fade into gold. For the first time in years, Alexander laughed, not the polite laughter of business dinners, but something real. As they stood to leave, he said quietly, "Mara, I don't know what this is, but I'd like to see you smile like that again." She looked at him for a long moment, then said, "Smiles are safer in memories, Mr. Holt." But he caught the faint warmth in her eyes, a spark she couldn't quite hide. The next week, a letter arrived addressed to Mara. Alexander found it by accident on the lobby desk. The return address read The Hague, Netherlands. When she saw it, her face went pale. She slipped it into her pocket before he could ask. That evening she disappeared early. Hours later, he found her on the rooftop terrace, tears glinting in the wind. He approached quietly. "Bad news." She shook her head. "Just reminders, Mara. You can talk to me." She took a deep breath. "My husband's family wants me to come back. They think I should testify about the accident that killed him. But I can't. I can't face that world again. Alexander stepped closer. Why? Because I was there, she said, voice breaking. And I survived when he didn't. The words hung between them like thunder. I keep hearing the sound, she whispered. Every night, every time I close my eyes. He hesitated, then placed a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to face it alone anymore. She looked up at him, tears glistening under the city lights. For a moment, the distance between Millionaire and Maid vanished completely. Then she stepped back, composing herself. You're kind, Mr. Holt, but I can't be your charity project. It's not charity, he said softly. It's connection. She turned away, and connections break. Then she walked back inside, leaving him staring at the stars that suddenly felt much too far away. A few days later, Alexander had to fly to Boston for a conference. He almost canceled. Before leaving, he stopped by the kitchen where she was polishing silver. I'll be gone 3 days, he said. Will you still be here when I get back? She looked up, surprised. Where else would I go? He smiled. Good, because when I come back, I'd like you to join me for dinner. Not as staff. Her hands froze mid-polish. You don't have to. I wantcha, he said. No uniforms, no titles, just 2 people who've both been through too much. She hesitated, eyes softening. We'll see, Mr. Holt, he laughed gently. That's not a no. As he left, she whispered to herself, and it's not a yes either. But when the door closed, she smiled a real, unguarded smile she hadn't felt in years. 3 days later, Alexander returned from Boston. The city looked softer that evening, the sky painted gold as if it too expected something new to begin. He walked into the penthouse carrying a single tulip, yellow, the color of quiet hope. Mara was setting the table, candles already lit. No uniform tonight, just a navy dress, simple yet graceful. He smiled. You kept your word, she blushed faintly. I said we'd see. They sat across from each other, the city glittering beneath them. Conversation came easily, about music, travel, and all the things that didn't require courage. At one point he said softly, you make this place feel like home. She looked down. Homes are fragile things, Mr. Holt. They break easily. Then let's build one that doesn't, he said, half smiling. For a moment, silence wrapped them both, comfortable and spoken. Then the doorbell rang. Alexander frowned. I wasn't expecting anyone. He went to the door. A tall man in a gray coat stood there, holding an envelope. His accent was European. Good evening, the man said politely. I'm looking for Mara Van Dyke. Alexander turned slowly. Mara had risen from the table, her face drained of color. The man stepped inside without invitation. It's urgent. The Dutch consulate needs her to sign an affidavit regarding the Brussels accident. Her husband's death was not an accident. The room froze. Mara's hands trembled. What are you saying? The investigation reopened. Someone tampered with the flight data. You may have been the target. Alexander's heart hammered. Target? What does that mean? The man handed Mara the envelope. You were translating documents tied to a corruption case. The people involved want to keep you silent. Mara stared at the paper as if it were burning her skin. I left that life behind. I'm sorry, the man said softly. But it seems that life hasn't left you. He turned and walked out, the door closing with a hollow thud. Alexander reached for her hand. Mara, talk to me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. You don't understand, Alex. My husband died because of me. They wanted the files I was translating. He took my place on that flight. He shook his head. That wasn't your fault. It was my name on the ticket. She pulled away, pacing near the window, her reflection trembling in the glass. I changed everything, my name, my country, my life, just to disappear. And yet you ended up here, he said quietly. She nodded. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. He stepped closer. Or maybe it gave you a second chance. Her eyes met his. For the first time, she didn't hide the storm inside. I don't deserve one, she whispered. Everyone does, he said. Especially the ones who think they don't. Before she could answer, his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered automatically. A deep voice spoke on the other end, calm, threatening. Tell Ms. Van Dyke the past is coming for her. And this time, it won't miss. The line went dead. Alexander stared at the phone, cold crawling down his spine. Mara, they know you're here. She looked at him, terror flickering through her eyes. Then I have to go. He grabbed her hand. No, you're not running again, not alone. Her voice cracked. If they hurt you, I'm already in it. Mara, let me stand beside you. Outside, Thunder rolled across the skyline like a warning. Inside, two souls stood at the edge of something bigger than fear, something that might destroy or save them both. As the storm raged outside, Alexander looked at Mara and said softly, "Whatever comes, we face it together." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. For the first time in years, she wasn't running anymore. And somewhere between fear and love, a new beginning waited. Thanks for watching Black Inside USA. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because every story deserves to be heard.